What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Motorfest. So as you all know, today is indeed Wednesday, which means the new summit is now live here on the game. So I would say, guys, it's kind of insane. We are almost halfway through October. Time really is flying insanely quick, but for this week, guys, the Japanese custom, we will also get ourselves the Liberty Walk Underglow there, but if you guys obviously have that, you will indeed get some money back for it, which if I had to guess is probably going to be around 100k, but in bronze, we have 50,000 XP toward the main stage, 10 LP points, which I would say is helpful. Then finally, the Fair Lady Z432, which compared to like the Underglow as well, you will also get money back for this car if you do own it. And then moving over to the next summit, guys, is going to be the Japanese Toge. And of course, we are indeed going to have a crazy looking purple surprise smoke, which I would say is going to be an interesting platinum reward. But in the other one, guys, we have 100,000 bucks. We also have a legendary performance part for the drift class, so that's obviously going to be pretty helpful. But in bronze, though, we only have 5,000 spare parts, which I would say is kind of odd considering the Crew 2 gave you like 50 to 100k, but that's most likely going to come down to, yes, the game is obviously like pretty much barely out, so hopefully in the future we might get like 15 to 20,000 because 5k is honestly not that much. But looking at this summit though, it is primarily going to be fully drift, guys, so this one will be interesting. And I would say by right now a lot of players most likely do not have maxed out sets, so having the drift class leveled up a bit is definitely going to be pretty helpful. I would say going after Slippery and or Hothead, even if it's not a legit Nitrochemist set and or like a Scorebreaker set, is going to be insanely helpful. So I myself will also have to start grinding out some gold parts because I have barely used the drift class, but I guess we might want to start doing that before this summit does come out. Do keep in mind, guys, we also have 3 slaloms here, so if you do have a Scorebreaker set, as long as you guys do have a Scorebreaker set on basically of the any ground vehicles, I would say this should be pretty simple. I myself have one on the Street Tier 2 and or the Rally Raid, so I guess you can switch off, but regardless of the class you do run, it's pretty easy to get at least 150k on every single one of these. Now moving over to the next summit, guys, the Japanese original rice patty is going to be a pretty interesting name for a summit. Before this, guys, the Honda S2000 looks insane, so I really cannot wait to drive that car. Look at those green rims, and or that livery is looking pretty awesome. But on gold we have a green wing underglow, which I would say is not that cool, but hey, I guess it's going to look interesting on some vehicles. Then in silver, 50,000 bucks, then finally 50,000 XP toward that main stage. Now moving over to the Japanese Custom Summit here, guys, it is going to have a slight difference to it. So on the top left of the screen, you will then see Fair. I did notice, guys, going over all of the vehicles here with like clicking on this, you are then going to notice you cannot change any of your said parts. So I do find this kind of interesting that yes, we do have a modifier on this, and I really cannot wait to see what we actually have in the future. So I will most likely make a quick video coming up soon going over this more and possible modifiers we could see in the future, but I really would say it is going to make these summits interesting. Now, you can change all of your pro settings on these 3 events here, but on the ones that you do have a vehicle loaned on, you will not be able to mess with those cars at all, so it's basically going to be around max level with regular pro settings on these. Now moving over to the first event here, guys, Glow Up is going to have the Nissan Skyline GTR, which funnily enough, I barely drive this car for that matter, but I have to admit, even being max 750, guys, I would say it's pretty decent. Do keep in mind, by the way, guys, once again, the actual level of your vehicle is locked for this, so I do believe every single person's car is indeed 750, so if you are worried about this summit, at least you can jump in and still compete in this one when driving the Skyline. Now, you can obviously change around the pro settings, but do keep in mind though, guys, you don't actually have to change your settings on this event. I really did find the GTR to actually be pretty dang good with regular settings. Now moving over to the next event, guys, you will have to use a loaned vehicle for this, so you will not be able to change the pro settings and or the parts on it, which I would say is going to make some of these summits pretty interesting. But do not worry, guys, I will touch more on that in a different video coming up most likely tomorrow. Now I have to admit, guys, this car is actually going to be decent, and do keep in mind, going around the corners is indeed going to be the biggest part of these events, and obviously having more nitrous is probably going to be helpful, so do try to use it at like the best times to get the most power. That way you have it for the end to really get the most speed to push in for that timer. And now moving over to the next event here with the Toyota Supra A80, which I would say everyone loves a Supra. Who doesn't, to be honest, because this car is an absolute meme in real life. But for this, guys, I do want to mention this once again. My Street Tier 2 is only $398 on this car, at least because I put no parts on it. And it does turn out the game obviously gives you like a maxed out car. So again, if you do not have maxed out vehicle classes, I would definitely recommend jumping into these events and trying this out. But for the Toyota, guys, I would recommend changing around the settings a bit, but luckily you don't have to go insane with it to get a high score. Now moving over to the next event, guys, you will once again have a vehicle loaned to you, which is indeed one of my favorite cars. The Nissan GTR is actually going to be insanely good. Now, do keep in mind, guys, I would say the biggest thing about this event is to keep your speed up around the corners as much as you possibly can. Do keep in mind the GTR is obviously all-wheel drive, so I myself was also pretty impressed with it, especially flying around different corners with this car. So you obviously cannot change the pro settings on it either, but I have to admit, guys, the base settings you are running in this event are actually pretty dang good. Now moving over to the next event, guys, is going to be with the MX-5. So this car I would say is going to be slightly decent overall. Now do keep in mind, I have to admit, guys, I wouldn't say this thing is going to be like the best car out there. I mean, how many people do you see running the Mazda MX-5 like on PvP? So it is obviously not going to be like the most used vehicle, but the MX-5 I would say is going to be a pretty decent car for the most part. Do keep in mind, by the way, guys, you are most likely going to recognize this event from the Monster Truck race a while back in a different summit, so I do think a lot of people most likely won't like this race, but I have to admit, guys, the MX-5 is probably going to be decent. Do keep in mind the biggest thing here is getting around the corners as fast as you can. And then for the final event in the summit, guys, with a Street Tier 1 vehicle, the Mazda RX-7 Turbo 10th Anniversary. So this vehicle is actually going to be way better than I thought. Do keep in mind, though, it is going to be a Street Tier 1, so it isn't going to be doing like 250 miles an hour. I also have to admit this, guys, on every single event, the AI are most likely going to be insanely annoying, so I would recommend, though, guys, getting by the AI in every single event this summit is going to be crucial. I did notice they definitely get in the way and or can slow you down, so definitely get away from them as quick as you possibly can. But the RX-7 Turbo is going to be a pretty decent car. It does seem to corner insanely well for what it is, plus I have to admit, it sounds insanely good. And then moving over to the first skill is going to be a slalom. So for this, guys, all you really have to have is going to be a score breaker set. It doesn't matter which one you have for any of the classes. So for example, I'm using a Street Tier 2, which I would say is one of the slowest, right behind the Street Tier 1 for that matter. But the Ducati Panigale and or a Street Tier 2 is by far going to be perfect to at least get 150,000 points. Now moving over to the next skill is going to be a Speedtrap. So for this, guys, I did decide to run the Corvette C7 Stingray. Do keep in mind, though, you can basically run any drag car of your choice. I also do want to say one thing, though. I am not running any gold parts on this car. It is basically going to be purple and or blue, so I definitely have some work to do in the drag class. That is definitely going to be a fact, but I do want to mention, guys, if you are looking to get well over 400 miles an hour, you will have to slipstream at least one person to get a crazy high speed. Then moving over to the final skill, guys, it is going to be an escape. So obviously using a hypercar is probably your best option, mainly because in Motorfest they did make the hypercars faster than like the Alpha GP. So you are most likely going to see a lot of these cars being used. Now, I have to admit, guys, I could probably get farther on this, but I really don't feel like trying to not deal with the AI and or like the crazy traffic. My goodness, guys, I actually feel like the feats have more traffic on them. Let me know if you have noticed that in the comments below, but I would say a Bugatti is probably going to be a great option, and the biggest thing is to obviously watch out for the AI and go as fast as you possibly can. Overall, though, guys, I did find this summit to be insanely fun to do, plus the fair modifier is definitely interesting, so do stay tuned for a video coming on that tomorrow. But if you guys have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insight.